Grab your pre-workout and turn up that volume. It is time for a new episode of the Powerlifter's Den with your host, Cam Smith. What's up, Powerlifter's Den family? Want to rep the podcast and look good while doing it? Check out my official merch store at plden.company.site. We've got tees, hoodies, beanies, hats, and more, and gear that'll keep you motivated in and out of the gym. Every purchase helps support me and the podcast and keeps the den growing strong. So whether you're hitting a heavy squat session or just lounging in style, we've got you covered. Head to plden.company.site and grab your merch today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Powerlifter's Den. I'm your host, Cam Smith, and today I want to bring on Katrina Bielomyza.
Bielomyza.
Okay. So before we kind of get a little introduction to her, the first time I met her, she came up to Evolve, and John Rupo said, "This is Kat. She is a phenomenal bench presser," and she proceeded to rap me that day, and I think that was my third time in raps, and to this day, that was still one of the most painful raps I've had. So, Kat, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, first of all, that rap, you told me to go heavy, or you told me to go tight, so beware what you ask for. So I'm Katrina Bielomyza. I have been powerlifting for about 12 years now. I live in Massachusetts. I have 3 kids, grown kids now, 2 in college, 1 on the way. I'm married to my, most of the time, amazing husband who supports me in powerlifting and coaches me, and he does all my handling. I have a million jobs. I have a full-time job. I work for the federal government, and then I have my hands in a bunch of different things. So
yeah,
on top of training and coaching.
Mm-hmm. We'll get started by talking about your background. I know your kind of journey to the gym was maybe a little bit different than others. I feel like a lot of people in the sport kind of have a background in whether it's like college sports or high school sports. I kind of got into it. For you, it kind of came from being a mom, kind of getting into the gym from there. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was in the military for 13 years, and during that time, we had to do, your regular physical fitness kind of stuff, run a mile and a half, all that kind of stuff. But I would gain weight and lose it through cardio, and I never, ever went to the gym. I hated the gym. And after I got out of the military and I moved back, I had like all my kids and went to school, and I did my MBA in like a year instead of 2. And I essentially gained a ton of weight, eating like crap, stress. And I was like, man, I need to do something. And I know I'm not going to do it on my own. So I went to what's Club Fitness now, local gym. And I walked in and I was like, I need a personal trainer. And so I went with your regular, normal, personal trainer, nothing to do with powerlifting whatsoever. I think for 6 months, he had me doing awful circuit training crap, and like I hated it. And so one day when I finally had started losing the weight, I was like, I want to learn how to use the barbells and the dumbbells and stuff, because it was always super intimidating. All the big guys are over, in front of the mirrors at 5 o'clock at night, and I'm like, I don't know how to do any of it. And so he brought me over to the squat rack, and I remember, I'll never forget this. It was an empty bar, and then I think maybe we put like a 10 or something on it. And I went down and I came back up from my set, and I was like, ooh, I have a terrible memory, and I remember this. I was like, ooh, this is going to be a problem. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I'm just going to want to keep going heavier and heavier and heavier. And he's like, well, that's not really what we're doing. Like, he was trying to show me how to like do reps. And, over that time, I would squat, and then he taught me how to bench press, which was even worse. I mean, the bar felt heavy. I was wobbly that time. So to back up, I had started at like 220 pounds of fat, like no muscle whatsoever. And I had gotten down to like 139. So I was tiny. And that bar felt like death. And then we moved on to deadlift. And he was trying to teach me conventional. I was like, I hate this. Don't like it. I still hate deadlift. But we eventually moved to sumo. And really what kept me going with it was that he kind of changed my whole programming and let me, start doing kind of like a powerlifting program. And then I realized, I can change my body, look better, and do no cardio. And this is way better. So I loved it from, that first time I got under the squat bar. And then I did my first powerlifting meet in 2014. It was a RPS Vermont, New Hampshire championships or whatever. And I squatted something like, I can't remember the numbers, but it was like 250, benched 135, missed the rack command, stomped my feet like a little brat, walked out, came back and did like a two something deadlift. And it was this weird, I cringe to watch it, like half sumo, half conventional. Like my hands were outside of my legs, but they were way too wide to be conventional. And I was and totally like straight legged it and pulled it up. Um so that was the beginning.
Yeah. So for you, what was that initial attraction to kind of go test out the free weights?
I don't know. I just wanted so when I was younger, I'll back up a little bit. When I was like 15, my boyfriend of like 2 years broke up with me. And instinctively, like nobody taught me this, nobody pushed me in any direction. But in order to like deal with that heartbreak, I started going to the YMCA. And I always would use, I didn't know how to do anything, but I would use all of the machines. And they had this old school Nautilus leg press that was like the size of like half a room. And I even then I wanted to just I was like I want to do the whole stack. And then like I remember the calf raise. I was like, "Oh, I can do this for like reps." So it just always I don't know what it is. It just felt good. It relieved stress, made me feel strong. Um and like you accomplished something.
Yeah, I mean the gym is a very rewarding place. I mean, I started at my local Y at 16 with my dad, just trying to get stronger for sports, and then we kind of got into like obstacle course races, and then from there, once we got to college and stuff, and I started to realize I can actually get pretty strong. That's when I
Yeah.
got into my first meet, and obviously I've been hooked since.
I wish somebody would have came up to me when I was that age and said, "Hey, I can show you, do you want to learn how to squat or have you ever thought about going into any of the strength sports?" But it didn't happen. It was, the YMCA, people go there to do their workout and leave. But I wish that somebody would have come to me sooner because at 34, that's when I started. That's a little bit late. And even when that personal trainer that I had, he was like, "You should do a meet." I was like, "What are you talking about? Like they do that? I'm too old for that. Like, what is that?" And I didn't even know it was a thing. So, I mean, you could argue that I'd probably be out of the sport by now if I started at a younger age and had continued to go uh, at the same pace that I have been, because I mean, I push it. And, I've had numerous injuries, which I'm sure we might talk about, but um, it's just, I probably would have been done by now.
Yeah, and I mean the thing with powerlifting is you're seeing it more and more that there really is no too late or too young. I mean, there's definitely too young, but there's really no age that's too late to start. You're seeing people that are competitive, and then you'll see their grandfather coming in to compete, or you'll see people starting in their late 30s like yourself and hitting
Yeah.
all-time world records. So I think that's one of the cool things about powerlifting is there's always a place for someone.
There's, I mean, if you look at Ellen Stein, I mean, she's raw, and she trains under Swede, but she PRs every single meet, and I think she's like in her 70s,
Yep.
and she's ridiculously strong. And then we got Debbie Dominga, who just keeps going and going and like blowing everybody away with what she can do on her lifts. Um, there's so many people that I always said though, for me, if I'm not going to continue to power lift if I go backwards. So for a long period of time after I tore my knee, it was probably 3 years before I actually got a PR again on that. And I kept opening at 683 and getting my opener and then going to like 702 and then missing. And I was like, at the 2023 WPO, I was like, you know what? If I don't go over 700 on my squat at this meet, maybe it's time. And I squatted 750. So
Yeah.
I was like, I guess I'm hanging around.
Yeah, so I know that you said you started, you did your first meet in 2014, but you didn't get into competing multiply until 2018.
Mhm.
Maybe from those in between those 4 years, what kind of got you that interest into getting into the gear?
So a very dear friend of mine that has since moved to Arizona named Bob Clark has been in gear and coached lifters his entire life. And he came to Lightning. He moved from wherever he was at back to Connecticut. And he was always pushing me to get into gear. He wanted to have a geared group at the gym. We didn't have anybody in gear at that time. And so he kept pushing. And so he found me a deadlift. Actually, I reached out to Jamie Mata up at Fairhaven. And I was like, can you help me like find a deadlift suit? Well, I figured start with the deadlift suit. And so I putzed around with the deadlift suit for a few years before I fully committed to that too. I did a meet at one point where I did 3 attempts raw. So I did full power, raw with wraps, raw bench, raw deadlift, and then I did a whole nother flight, put the suit on, and did the geared deadlift. So the bench shirt was always kind of, everybody was like, oh man, that bench shirt, that's the hardest thing. And it was. And at first they put me in a katana. I hated that shirt. I just could not. I was like, I'm burning this thing. I could never touch it. Hurt. I was like, why am I doing this? This sucks. And got rid of that after the first meet. The first meet that I did in multiply, I did a raw bench opener because I hadn't done it. I'd been training in that thing for a year and had not even touched or had like one complete rep. So we did the raw opener. I didn't get my last second two benches. And then after that, I was like, can we just go to multiply? And that's when I got in the SDP. And I was like, oh, it still took a really long time though to get the hang of it because I didn't have a group of geared lifters to learn from. I'd go up and see Jamie up at Fairhaven. He'd show me everything to do. My husband and I, we would record it. And at the time he was lifting in gear too. So then we'd go back to the gym and I'd be like, you're not doing it right. It's not working. And like, the frustration with lifting and imagine the both of us
Yeah.
trying to learn this. It was a rough time, but we got through it.
Yeah, I mean a poly multiply shirt, whether 2 ply, 3 ply, is definitely out of anything in powerlifting is the most difficult thing to be able to do.
Yeah. And so much so that even I get afraid every time I buy a new shirt, because I'm like, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be right. You get so attached to the groove and where everything is. And even, breaking in a new shirt completely changes everything.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point too with maybe swapping out gear. I think a lot of people will get new gear or try to upgrade their gear or get a tighter shirt when they have something that's working that is still has enough pop in it, like a SCP can keep
Hmm.
life for a while. And I feel like I've seen a lot recently of people they'll get a new brand or a new suit or something, and then by the end of the prep or by meet day, they're back in their LUP and they're back in their SDP.
Well, I mean, there's always, you're right. But I mean, I do it too, though. Like if somebody has something new, I'm like, let me see if that is going to be the magic thing that makes, my bench go up by 100 pounds or my squat. Like all I need to do is get these briefs and, wear this squat suit combo and it worked for them. So, it's going to work for me. And then you try all these things and then you're like, yeah, I'm just going to go back to what I was using.
Yeah,
It's never worked out for me when I've added any extra things.
yeah.
Like just get stronger.
Yep, and I think one of the most important parts of multiply, with it being so many more variables in a raw lift, is the more variables control you can control, the better performance you're going to get.
Exactly. Um, and even then, it's a whole nother. It's a completely different animal than raw.
Yeah,
Everything could be perfect. I made a really stupid mistake with my bench shirt at the 2023 WPO. I had lost some weight. It was kind of worn out, and I had heard from people, oh, just boil the shirt, just boil it. And so I didn't do it. But I was thinking about it, and then my husband was like, I boiled your shirt for you, and I was like, oh crap. So he did. I put it in my bag. I didn't even try it till I got to the meet. I get to the meet. It's not going on. It's barely going on. I can go down like 2 inches with like 400 pounds. Thankfully, Jamie was there, and he's like OCD about everything and like being prepared. And he's like, I brought my backup shirt for you. And I was like, and it was a little bit too big, but I got a bench. So it saved my squat. But even, even all this time, you still make mistakes and you still learn. And I'll never do that again. So
Yeah. And I think this is a good little segue into one of the misconceptions that a lot of raw lifters have with multiply. Obviously, it's been brought up before, and a lot of
mhm.
experienced multiply lifters understand that the gear doesn't magically help you lift a lot of weight. But maybe just tell us your kind of opinion or your general statements on that theory.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you can even start with somebody who is raw that isn't using wraps, right? And then you put wraps on them and you think that those wraps are going to magically, help them get the bounce out of the hole and what they're looking for. And I've seen people just, it does nothing. It almost makes their squat worse. They just go down and they're like dead in the water. And I'm like, what are you doing? And so you have to even learn from that standpoint. But the gear is painful and you're still holding that weight and it is crushing. And so when you're raw, when you get under the bar, you have this confidence that I trained this way, I've handled these weights before, and I know that I have it. When you're in gear, you stand up, for example, with like a 700-pound squat for me, and it feels heavy as fuck. And it's you're shaking, it's crushing, and you have to trust that the gear and your legs are going to be able to hold you back up or pull you back up from that squat. So it's it's essentially, if you were to bench with a slingshot, same thing. It's all overload. So everything is a lot scarier. Um, Certainly you're going to the chance of injury is a lot more. You need an entire crew to make sure that you don't get hurt. But if anything, I always say that the more pain that you can handle, the more pain you can deal with in multiply, the heavier your lifts are going to be because that's what it is. It's to a certain extent. I mean, some people, for me anyway, some people like their gear a little bit loose. They don't like their wraps a little bit too tight. For me, I'm not necessarily trying to get to the point where it's, you know, like in a bench shirt, I wouldn't want it to be like excruciatingly small to where I couldn't do anything. But that shit is tight. Like everything is tight. And for squat, especially, I put everything on. I've got elbow sleeves. I'm like at this age, I'm protecting everything. I got elbow sleeves on, wrist wraps. I've got briefs, wraps, suit. You're just like walking like this and like the fuck am I doing? Like, this is insane. And then you can't even get under the bar. You have to have somebody shove you under the bar and, and then just hope that everything stays perfectly where it's supposed to be. It's kind of like lifting like a statue.
Yeah.
You don't want to deviate in any direction whatsoever. You want to stick your butt out on that squat, keep your chest up, open your knees, and just pray everything stays in a line until you get that up call and come up.
Yeah, and for me with my first multiply meet, I wasn't. None of the gear I have is super tight, and that's something that one of my main goals for my next prep is to just work on putting the gear tighter, setting the suit more, setting the shirt, learning the tricep
Mhm.
cuff, and I think that alone, being able to handle that is what's going to make the difference. Obviously, getting better at the technique is going to improve more than just putting on tighter stuff. But I think having that mental toughness and that mindset of being like, fuck it, whatever happens, happens. I'm going to do it. I know the risks. And for me, the first time that I actually um, either it was on a squat. I was down at Chris Delafaz, and it was a reverse band squat, and I picked the 900. I missed it, but that was the first time I picked a weight and was like, "Oh fuck, this is heavy." So
Yeah.
I never had that. Even in the meet with my third attempt squat, I've never picked a weight and been like, "Holy shit, this I could feel this in my bones."
Yeah, the second meet that I ever did in gear, my coach was who I mentioned earlier, Bob Clark. I had him. He was amazing at writing programming, and he was so good. But I trusted him so much that when we went to meets, I would only know what my opener was, and I didn't want to know what the rest of it was. And so in the first meet that I did in multiply, I squatted 600. And then I think we opened at like maybe 650 or something, 625, 650 for this one. And my third attempt was 722. And I had no clue what it was. And I stood up from that squat. And that was the first squat that I was like, I think I just died a little bit. Like I don't know like what I don't even remember the top like 4 inches of the squat and was like, did I get it? Did I get it? And I was like, how am I gonna bench after this? That was the first time in a meet ever that I was worried that I wasn't going to recover enough for bench between that heavy squat. Um, I did. It was fine, but that squat took the life out of me. And then I was like, all right, I kind of like it. I
Yeah,
kind of like that feeling.
exactly. I was just gonna say after that happened, I was like, oh, okay, it's getting fun now. Like now I get to pick some weight that's gonna actually like terrify me into actually hitting the weight. But
Mhm.
that kind of goes with the mental toughness and facing fear. So for you, what are some of the things that maybe you say to yourself, or some of the mindsets that kind of you keep in the back of your mind when getting under such big weight?
In my entire life, in life in general, I have never let my fear of something stop me. I mean, and I have a lot of fears. I don't walk around being like, oh, I'm fearless and, I'm this big badass or whatever. I just refuse to let my fears stop me from doing what I want to do. And a good example of that is public speaking. To be honest, when I was in high school, you know, I was like trying to read my essay. And then I got to, as I went out into the workforce and got better and better jobs, I had to present to people. I was like, I'm not going to not get my dream career because I can't do this. And it was the same thing with powerlifting, even in the gym. If it doesn't necessarily need to be a meet. If it's a heavy squat and I really want it, or a heavy bench, or I don't really deadlift doesn't. Yeah. I mean, it's because like deadlift is like if you can't pick it up, you can't pick it up. So it's not scary, but my heart is like pounding out of my chest, like every single time. As soon as it goes over 700, I'm like, and it gets better. It moves as it doesn't like when you're lifting 500 pounds. Or when I was lifting 500 pounds, my heart was doing the same thing. But then, it moves, and so I'm hope maybe it'll be 800 someday that my that my heart starts pounding. But I just do it anyway. I don't even know how to describe it. You just have to force yourself to do it
Yeah.
and know that you have good spotters and trust the people that you're with. And the feeling that you get when you accomplish something that you previously thought was impossible or that you couldn't do is probably the best feeling in the world. So for me, it's worth it to put myself through all of that to get to that point. There's a goal.
Yeah.
So unless you want to squat 500 pounds for the rest of your life, you're going to have to face it.
And I think for me, I kind of have a different little approach to it. Not so far different, but I'm kind of in the mindset of, I mean, I do have a very high goal for myself. And
Mm-hmm.
to accomplish these goals, I do have to kind of be the fearless. And for me, I've yet to have, I don't know if I'm just not there in my career yet, or maybe I'm just a little mentally unstable. But as
Maybe
far
both.
as you could put 1,100 pounds on the bar right now, and I know I wouldn't get it, but I'd still give it a go. And I think that's what maybe separates, or what makes some of these top level lifters where they're at, is being able to go under something that they don't know whether they're gonna survive the lift. To be honest, because I mean, unless you've seen someone pass out, get a bloody nose, or launch out of a mono, or break a leg, or break an arm, then you
Mm-hmm.
don't really understand just what people are willing to sacrifice to achieve these lifts.
Yeah, I mean, it was up until I tore my ACL and meniscus. I don't even remember what year it was now, or I think it was an APF meet out in Chicago or in that area, and I unracked it, and my knees weren't pushed out before I unracked it. I kind of unracked and pushed my knees out, and I just felt it pop, and um, people over the music in the audience heard it pop. And so I like re-racked it. Bane was behind me. I think Bane was spotting. And I went to go unrack it again. I was like, what was that? All right, re-rack, do it again. He's like, no, you're done. Like, what do you mean? I don't feel any pain when I'm on the platform for some reason at all.
Hmm.
Like 0%. I could be in like the worst pain, meat prep, awful, everything hurts. I get up there, it's gone. As soon as I walked off that platform though, I was like, oh fuck, that's not good. And um coming back from that is even scarier. Coming back from these injuries. I mean, even squatting the bar to I was like, is my knee going to be okay? Is it okay? Like, and it now after it's been a few years, I don't think about it anymore. But um, occasionally, if there's like a little tinge of something, I'm like, no, stop. But if you want something and you're passionate enough about it, which I am, you're willing to do whatever it takes. And people always say to me, what do you got to be careful. You're going to get old. You're getting older. Like, do you want to be in pain when you want to be in a wheelchair when you're like 60? No, obviously I don't. And I do everything possible that I can within my control to ensure that I don't. Um, but it is a possibility if I
Yeah.
keep doing it. Possibility. I mean, what we're trying to do at this level, like, I don't know what the heaviest female. Well, it's Leah. Leah has in what 953 or
Yep.
something like that.
953.
Yeah, but in my weight class, I think it's 815. So you look at 750 and 815, like we're getting to the top end of what's physically possible at this point, even though everybody's getting ridiculously strong. I can't even imagine what it's going to be like in like 5, 10 years from now. But there's a risk of injury every single time you get under the bar.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time we can start talking about the nutrition recovery, all the PT work and things that you should do and are basically necessary to do to keep you in the sport and keep you from possibly blowing out a body part. Obviously,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's always a risk, and it's a risk that we're all willing to take. But for you, what are some of the most important recovery aspects or prep work before getting under a heavy squat for you?
Well, so I guess first I want to kind of say that, well, I'll talk about that. I guess I'll talk about that first. It probably takes me a good 30 to 45 minutes of warm up before I even get under a bar. I'm doing all sorts of mobility drills, making sure everything is warmed up, opened up. But even prior to that, if I have, a squat day or any lift that is heavy, the prep starts way before you even get to the gym.
Yep.
So you you're I'm certainly not going out and drinking with my friends, and I'm in bed trying to get, a reasonable amount of sleep. I make sure that I eat enough because that's a big thing for me is that I don't eat enough.
Same.
Um, I get busy and it's just I don't want to eat the chicken and rice anymore
Yep.
or the steak and like even steak and potatoes. Like I used to love prime rib and I'm just like, meh, ugh, now because it becomes more of a job making sure that you're hydrated, um, making sure that you're mentally ready for it too. And I go to the chiropractor regularly. I get regular massages. Um, I get my blood work done. I go to my regular doctor appointments. It all starts before you even get to the gym. But on the day that you're there, I have, my water with my electrolytes in it, probably some like fast acting carbs to keep up energy. And, just I advocate that everybody should start their warm ups under the bar. Unless you're like maybe some of the big guys can start with a plate because a bar is like nothing for them, but a plate or the bar. Nobody should be going in there and, loading up 3, 4 plates on the bar and just starting from there. You're asking for trouble. First of all, your body's not going to be acclimated to the weight and it's going to feel like shit. It's going to feel heavy as fuck.
Yeah.
I was like, but your technique isn't warmed up, nothing. So, um, Yeah, I mean, it's a full-time job in and of itself, outside of the gym, before you train, and even after you train. I have a hot tub. I'm very lucky. I go in it immediately when I get home. I go to the sauna regularly. I do everything that I need to do to lift as best as I can, feel as best as I can, but also to prevent injury. And that's the biggest thing. And what I was going to say prior to that was I see a lot of what I'm really passionate about is helping newer lifters that, and I guess it's because I see them all the time in the gym. And up until recently, I was at Lightning Fitness, and it back before it moved, that gym moved to the new location. It was primarily a powerlifting and strongman gym, but now it's expanded. It's huge, and there's all sorts of different people there with all sorts different goals. And you see these kids lifting with bad form and like um taking out heavy bench presses on their own. Like, I'm just like, oh my God, I know you're 20 and you're healthy now, but like, save your shoulders. So I'm really passionate about helping people get their foundation and being safe, because it's going to set them up for life, or it's going to be the reason why they quit is because they get injured and stuff. So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I
just that
mean,
way.
prime example, I mean, Rupo just squatted 1,200 pounds and he starts with the
Yeah.
bar every time. I mean, he does about 20 minutes of PT work before too, but if that isn't a prime example of everyone should start with the bar, then I don't know what is. But I think a good analogy in terms of kind of treating your body right is like having a car. Any car that gets its oil change and gets its tune-ups and its new tires is a car that's going to last you a lot longer than a car that you just let it till the wheels fall off.
Yeah, and I also think, and I don't know the whole science behind it, and I know there is science behind it, but I think that I always do the same exact thing. So I think that that sets your body up to know, like your brain and your central nervous system to know, okay, she's doing this, all these things right now to warm up. That means that something heavy, she's going to be doing a heavy squat. And I never change it. I do the exact same, like 10 exercises. I'll even eat the same things sometimes to make sure, especially if it's before a meet. I have like a weird thing that I have to eat, which is terrible. Is get cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory, but that's not even a good thing because it's all fat. Like, you technically wouldn't want fat the night, but I do it anyway, and it's just become a thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, obviously being a collegiate athlete, and this goes to high school too. It probably goes for all sports, but primarily football players. Any football players listening, every single football player has their pregame routine the night before, the morning of, whether it's they take a shower in the
Yeah,
certain shower in the locker room, or they go get a certain breakfast, or just there's so many things that kind of prep your body right, and there's so much more to just prepping your body physically. It's prepping your body mentally, and kind of getting your body into that right mindset. Like, okay, it's time to go. And another example of that, I think, is why a lot of these crews, like at Evolve, at Hellbent, at anywhere else, we squat at Sunday, we squat at 9 a.m. because most meets
hmm
start at 9 a.m. and you always start with
hmm
squats.
yes, I've always done the same thing even prior to that. For a little bit when I was at Lightning, it got changed to Monday nights, and I hated it. I
Yeah.
was like, I'm exhausted already, and it's Monday after work. I like to go in the morning. I've rested, I've had my food, I'm fresh, I'm ready to go. My mind is clear. I'm not thinking about anything else other than those squats, and it's 1,000,000% mental. It's all mental. It really is. If you believe you can do it, you can do it. If you believe you can't, if you don't believe you can do it, you're not going to do it. So, and you have to, it's become a skill that I've learned over the years, and confidence. You build confidence over the years, to doing this. But I never go into the gym thinking I can't do this.
Yep.
It may turn out that way.
Yeah.
I'm like, which is really shitty, because there are days sometimes where you're like, oh man, I got this. I am going to crush that. And then you go in and you're like, meh, meh, you know, feels like shit. I'm stapled. Somebody please help me. Like, and then there are other times it's weird because other times, maybe you don't do everything exactly perfect, but mentally you're in a better place and you can do things you've never done before.
Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest PRs I've ever hit are some of the best lifts, and I'm sure this goes for a lot of people. Or some of the days where you feel like your absolute worst. You feel like you're not
Yeah, I
gonna
don't know why
even.
that is.
Yeah, it's because I mean, for me, I think it's just kind of the idea is you're only thinking about your own suffering, and you're like, we're just gonna do it. If you kind of go into that day or that meet or that training session of fuck it, let's do it anyways. I think you're setting
Mhm.
yourself up for a better day. And as for the Sundays, like kind of developing that routine, that habit, and kind of getting your body to that point. I mean, for me personally, if I wake up on a Sunday and it's not a squat day or we're traveling, my body's like, what are we doing? We should be squatting right now.
I love training at Evolve with all you guys on Sundays. It's been a couple months now, probably, that I've been doing that. And it makes an absolute difference having, especially the young guys there, that the raw lifters, they're so excited and they're hitting PRs every week. And, then everybody's been in meet prep because there's the meet coming up next weekend. And then there was Holy Wars last weekend. So everybody, it's like the best time to be at the gym because everybody's like super intense
Yeah.
and super into it. So it hypes you up, even if you're not in meet prep. And I recently and more often now, I'm going to go down to Hellbent from time to time and train with Jordan, um, which has been awesome. She's obviously amazing.
Yeah.
I was there when she squatted. We were doing reverse bands, and because that's what she was doing, and I didn't have a program yet, and I was like, all right, I'll do that. And she squatted 915. It was her first time going over 9, and I was like, there's no way I'm catching up to that, and I didn't. But I still squatted 865 with reverse bands because I was in that environment with her and everybody screaming and yelling, and I felt safe enough to try it, and it felt lighter than anything I've done recently. So I was like, this is amazing. I've been very fortunate to be around such talented, strong, kind, generous people, and I don't take that for granted. And I try to give that back to whoever asks.
Yeah, and that brings up the whole environment aspect of powerlifting. I think obviously you can train right, you can program right, you can get the right coaching cues, you can eat right, you can do all that shit, but at the end of the day, the environment that you're training in is going to be the biggest increase in your total and your happiness and everything. Because you can walk into a gym that has every piece of equipment that's ever made. If there's no one there, you're not going to get that far. If you go into a garage gym, like, I don't know, like Bob Merck's gym, like a
Yeah,
prime example, like Hellbent, it's in an industrial park, like all these industrial park gyms. If you have that environment, doesn't matter what you're training on, you're gonna get to where you want to be.
Bob Merck invited me down. He's been such a good friend, him and his wife Stacy, for so many years now. And I can't believe it's been so long since I met him, but I was nobody. I had done one geared meet, and I don't know if he reached out to me or how it happened, but he was like, you should come down and squat with me one time. And I was like, I told my husband, I was like, Drew, Bob Merck wants me to come down and squat with him. He's like, we're going. And I was like, I don't know, that's kind of scary. They're like really big and strong. And like, so we did. And I went down there and I was like, it's tight. That little garage, it's actually his basement is tight.
Yep.
And like, there's a bunch of big guys down there. And I think I was supposed to do like a set of triples, some easy weight. And he was like, at like 5:30, he's like, I don't know where those plates are, so we're just gonna throw on a 45 and you're gonna do a single. And I was like, and then I still have those videos, and um it's amazing to me how these lifters, myself included, now that I'm part of I like the lifters that have been around a while, but these lifters that have been around a while and have accomplished so much are so willing to pull you in, help you, give you anything and everything you need, and be so generous with their time and everything and not ask for anything in return. And I think that's one of the best things about this community. Um, that meant a lot to me when he brought me down there, and it made me feel like, all right, I belong in this. I belong in equipped lifting. because even to this day, I think my raw squat is a lot prettier and more technically sound than my multiply squat, but it's getting there.
Yeah. And like, yeah, the community is awesome. Like the past weekend at Hellbent, like every everyone who's everyone was there. It was fucking awesome, and it's
Yeah,
gonna change the course of powerlifting, especially in New England. New England powerlifting has seen such a surge and especially multiply, but even just across the board, it's amazing. But before we kind of wrap things up, let's talk a little bit about what you're known for most is your all-time world record bench presses in the
hmm
unlimited division that you have set 4 times over, and I believe you now have to go try to set it for a 5th time. So
yes.
maybe tell us about when you first hit that, what it was, and what you got it up to, and what your goals are for going after it again.
So when I first heard about the band shirts, I was like, "What the hell is this? This is stupid. This is like a big slingshot. Who's even doing this? Nobody's doing it." And I still don't think of it. I love it. I
Yep.
think it's fun. But do I actually think that I bench press 650 pounds? No. I know that I'm getting a lot of, but what got me into it was we had a meet at Lightning, and Jamie Mata came down and he was competing in it, and he had his shirt, and we're around the same size. And so after he was done competing, I was like, "Can I play with your shirt?" And so he instantly was like, "Yeah," and put it on me. And I think I benched like over 5 the first time I put that on, and I was like, "What is the record?" Like, that's how women, like, instantly, like, I took the shirt off, I was like, "Open powerlifting," and I don't remember what it was at the time, but it was like I needed 600
Mm-hmm.
to take the record, and I was like, "I can do that." And so when I competed in that first meet, I had only probably been in that shirt a handful of times. I had no idea what I was doing. I missed my first 2 attempts because I was doing everything that I would do in a SDP.
Yeah.
I almost dumped it on my face. And then the second one, I can't remember what I did, but finally by the third one, I put it all together and I got the record. Um, and then uh, there's been a couple people, Rayanne Miller, we kind of went back and forth a little bit with it. And then most recently, Ashley Hoeta, if I'm saying her name wrong, but she came from arm wrestling. And this strong ass girl just comes out of nowhere and goes 700. And I see she's back in it too. So I'm like, shit, I gotta get my shit together before she gets back under it and goes goes and competes again because um yeah, it's the numbers are going to go crazy. I there wasn't a lot of movement last year in the numbers because I think people were kind of, well, I had injuries. I had shoulder surgery and bicep tendon repair on the same arm, so that prevented me from competing. I was going to do the bench. I forget what it's called, but at the Arnold, like on the main stage, it's like the bench.
Salute or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by Anderson, and I had to bail out of that. So I think I might do that again. I might try to do that this year. But I'm waiting for my new shirt, Rob Farrell, to come in the mail. So as soon as I get that, we'll see where I'm at. And if I put that shirt on and break it in a couple times, and I know that I can bench 700 or 701, whatever I need to, I'll just find a meet and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever meet is close and the next meet.
My meat.
Um, yes. Yeah. Can I use the band shirt?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you're gonna set a world record, I even if you weren't allowed
Okay.
to, I'd make you allowed to.
Okay. Yeah. So it's been fun. Then when you get back in the SDP though, you're like, oh, this hurts. Like the thing about the band shirt is it's a ton of pressure. It's ridiculously heavy. I don't know why, you know, holding 650 pounds over my face doesn't feel as heavy as picking it up off the floor for a deadlift, which is weird, but it's still crushing. I mean, I crank my wrist wrap so tight that I can't even open my hand. Um, but it's fun
Yeah.
because you can do things that you wouldn't normally be able to do.
Yeah, and
So
I think that's what makes the band shirt so polarizing is because at least someone, the all-time world record holder at one point, thinks that Yes, it does do a lot of the work. I understand that like multiply and stuff is more the skill. Obviously, it takes skill to use the bench shirt, and the more skill you have,
Mhm.
the more you get out of it. But being able to recognize that while still being able to crush an all-time world record is very respectable.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's sketchy as fuck.
Yes, yes, and honestly, the biggest thing with the band shirts is it's kind of just who's got the biggest balls to take that weight.
Mhm. And I have a feeling like there's no there's going to be no stop to this. I think I wouldn't put it past a female to bench 1,000 pounds someday.
Yeah.
It probably won't be me, just because something will break before that happens. But I would try.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you take that record back. Maybe you can move the goalpost pretty far up to maybe have it stay in place for a little bit longer. But I think we can kind of wrap things up here. So I'll ask you my final question. If you could give a new powerlifter or someone going into their first meet a word of advice, what would that be?
Hmm. Patience. I would say patience. Everybody wants, and I say that because my coaches and trainers throughout the years have been like, just it's going to take patience because you want it now,
Yep.
and in the beginning you're like, I want to get through the 225 bench, and then I want the 315. It took me not a long time to get to 225, and then I remember I was at 285 for like a year before I hit three. Patience, 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 and consistency. It'll come.
Yep. Those are the two things that'll get you to that high level. Well, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to come on. It was my pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me. You're welcome.
Attention lifters, are you ready to crush your next training session? Then you need Reach pre workout in your corner. With clean energy, laser sharp focus, and no crash, Reach is your ticket to smashing PRs and hitting new goals. And because you're a part of the Powerlifters Den community, you get an exclusive 10% off. Just use the code PLDEN at checkout. That's PLDEN for 10% off your order. Don't settle for average, reach for greatness with Reach pre workout. Your goals are waiting for you. Are you ready to grab them?